Sir, you're making a big mistake. I am a journalist. That's it. Nothing more.
Just it's finished.
Yes.
As a spy, I'm just trying to figure out why your country is so terrifying.
The first thing to know about Iran is that it is not evil. Americans and Iranians have a lot of things in common more than they have differences.
What do I have in common with you?
So can you tell me why just journalists meet up with this American spy on the eve of the unrest?
He's not a spy.
He's not a spy?
No, it's a show.
It's a show?
A comedy show. It's stupid.
It's very stupid, yes.
He's a comedian pretending to be a spy.
So can you tell me why American pretending to be a spy had chosen to interview you?
And why would a real spy have a TV show?
And that's a clip from Rosewater. I'm delighted to say we've been joined from New York by its writer and its director, Jon Stewart. Jon, hello, good afternoon.
How are you? Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Well, it's a pleasure. But I have to say, it's kind of like the least you can do. I've been a subscriber to your TV show for many. I actually pay money to watch your show. Yeah. It costs money.
You're the one. Yeah. You know, they told me there was this guy and that he paid money to see our I said, there's no way. There's no way somebody's throwing out cold hard cash for this.
Yeah. Anyway, so Rosewater is the movie. It's come out in the States, coming out over in the UK, and of course intimately linked to your show, to the Daily Show. Just tell us the story about how you became involved.
Very briefly, we had sent a correspondent. Normally, you know, if you watch the show, we generally keep our correspondents in front of pictures of the places that they go to. But every now and again, for no reason in particular, we send them to an actual place, and we sent them to Iran in the lead-up to the election between Mousavi and Ahmadinejad in 2009. Truthfully, not because of that, because George W. Bush had called them the axis of evil. And so we'd been trying to get somebody in because we'd never been to an evil place before. Just wanted to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
While we were there, we conducted an interview, Jason Jones, one of our correspondents, with Maziar Bahari. Once the election was over and the street protests took over and the allegations of fraud and the crackdown of the government, Maziar was arrested. He was held at Evan Prison in solitary for 118 days. They played for him the tape he did, the piece he did on our show, as evidence that he was a spy, because our correspondent was dressed in a keffiyeh and said on camera, "I am a spy, tell me about Iran." And they said, "Why is a spy speaking to you on the eve of the election?" And I believe Maziar's response was, "Why would a spy have his own television show?" And I think that's when the room went black.
But it's quite a jump from that story, you being a part of this extraordinary and terrifying story, to actually deciding that you're the guy who's going to make the movie.
Correct. Yes, that happened because Maziar and I got incredibly impatient with the Hollywood process, with the idea, you know, when we first got together, he was saying, "Is there any way you could help me see if we could make this into a film?" And I thought, well, sure, I've never done that before, but why not? And so we sent it to a variety of writers that we thought might be good for it, writers that we admired, but it turns out other people admired them as well and would give them money, whereas we didn't really have any. So at a certain point, I thought, this is a very relevant story. It's a story that I would like to be seen this century. So maybe the best way to execute it would be to write it and do it myself.
And have you always wanted to be a storyteller? I mean, is this something that you'd been thinking about doing for a while?
No, I really hadn't. You know, I started in stand-up, and I think ultimately probably always viewed myself through that lens. Had been doing this show for 15 years or so, and we've written a couple of books on this show, you know, done other projects because, you know, Lord knows anything you can do to keep away from having a fulfilling life and just working all the time. So I thought, well, why don't I just add this to that as well?
It's a story which has been told many times through the years, the idea of an oppressive country finding people that they don't like and torturing them. But was it too dangerous a story to cast Iranians in the lead?
No, I don't think it was too dangerous a story. I think it was, you know, there is for an Iranian to participate in it, I think they would necessarily probably have to have already been somewhat in diaspora from Iran. I don't think someone who wanted to go back and forth would be able to, and I didn't want that decision to be made. There are Iranians in the film, Golshifta Farahani, who plays Maziar's sister, Shori, Agdashlu, who plays Maziar's mother. I think originally I kind of had a purist sense of, this must be in Persian. It must be an all Iranian cast, preferably Iranians who'd only been held in Evin prison. And Maziar was very clear about the idea that, don't you want people to see it? And I thought, well, yeah, that's probably good. That's a good concern. So, I just decided to, with him as our touchstone, if he was okay with things, I was okay with things. And we went with what we thought were the most appropriate casting choices for the characters.
Yeah. And when we see Maziar being arrested right at the very beginning, he has a puzzled look on his face. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I smiled because I was thinking, well, I'm not surprised that you're smiling, because that's Martin from the Bridge arresting you. And we all know he's Danish.
Martin from the Bridge, that's right. He's Danish. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why is a Danish guy a guard in an Iranian prison? Yeah. It almost makes no sense. And then, even then, he thought, oh, my God, I can't believe the guy from the Bridge is going to keep me here. And that's really when I think he went, oh, now I'm in trouble.
Anyway, he is fantastic in it. But they have an unusual relationship. Once Maziar has been arrested and he's being held, and Kim Bodina, who is playing his torturer. But can you just explain just a little bit about, because yes, he's brutal and yes, he's savage, but it's slightly more nuanced and complex than that.
Well, I think the complexity of it is, was to portray the torture as done through a bureaucracy, as opposed to, I think we have a cinematic sense of torture as the ticking time bomb scenario, and and I'm going to beat you until you give me. But the truth is, it's a much more bureaucratic and sterile process, still brutal, but one that is sort of devoid of purpose to some extent, and just serving a state goal as opposed to one of our more narrative goals. And I think that within that, you have to remember that this is a job for the interrogator. And the interrogator views it as, Maziar is a VIP prisoner. This is an opportunity for him. He's a guy that's a bit of a thug and thinks, well, if I do well here, that will catapult me and make this job. I'll get a promotion and I'll get these. So he's got other concerns that are much less ideological and much more practical. And so when you view it through the lens of work, it becomes a much different story.
And the torture is cruel and the torture is brutal. But would it be fair to say that in comparison with some of the movies that we've seen and the documentaries maybe that we've seen in recent years, it's not as brutal as people might be fearing?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. Absolutely. And I think that, what you see from ISIS or these things is those are anomalies. What we try to present in the movie is an everyday dehumanization of people that occurs in these prisons, whether they be in, the United States uses solitary confinement as well, whether it's in the West and the East, whether it's an ideological regime, a democratic regime. We all, there are forms of this brutality that exist all around the world, and it may not be as sexy cinematically, but it's certainly more pervasive.
And you mix the story with actual reportage, and we see some of the televised debate between Ahmadinejad and Mousavi. I didn't watch it. I have to confess, I didn't see the whole of that debate. But how did it seemed pretty savage, the bit that you did put in. How did it compare with other leadership debates that you've experienced over the years?
It's actually quite. It's somewhat mild. I mean, the moment where he pulls out the file on Mousavi's wife is probably more beyond the pale than something. But it really is much more conversational than I think a Western audience would understand a debate to be. And not nearly, we have a vision. Again, our dialogue about Iran is this is part of the axis of evil. Their dialogue about us is death to America, the great Satan. Watching them go through their political process, you realize it's a far more nuanced and interesting country and land than we have been led to believe, in the same way that we are a more nuanced country than they've been led to believe.
Yes, and
hopefully those moments help illuminate those nuances.
And as your film and others have made the point that Iran's sort of anti-US CIA paranoia isn't entirely misplaced, given events many decades ago.
We did overthrow their democratically elected government. Just once. We only did it once. Come on. It was once. 1953, we overthrew the government. It happens.
So, and just on the televised debates, and obviously thoughts turning to the election coming up in the United States, this will be the first presidential election which Americans have had to go through without you, John, for a while.
I don't know. Yeah, they lasted hundreds of years without me, so I think they'll be okay.
Are you going to miss it?
I'm sorry, I thought you asked if I was going to miss it.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not going to miss it.
John,
what I'll miss is the fun I have with the people here doing it. We have an awfully good time doing it, but the actual process of it is somewhat dispiriting. But we make lemonade out of lemons for the most part.
Well, your program is the most joyous 69 pence a day that I spend. So I'm actually going to be better off.
I got to tell you, it is worth no more than 21 pence a day, and I can swear by that.
Before we finish, I have to tell you, we had Hugh Grant on the show a few months ago, and I asked him whether he was still banned from The Daily Show. And he said he wasn't sure, but he did confess that he had thrown what he called a mini tanty. A phrase I'd never heard before.
Oh, yeah. I had never heard that before either, and it makes it sound so much more adorable than what I think we experienced. But I like it.
Yeah. Is he still banned?
I don't think he was ever banned. It was just more like life's too short. I mean, we only use one guest a day. Half the time it's authors, so we don't really have that many. But I would not say he's not on the no-fly zone list, if that's what you're.
He might have to wait for the regime change in August before.
I think he's going to have to wait for regime change, and maybe he's the one behind the regime change. I don't know. Maybe it was the sanctions that were put on the show that caused this.
Jon Stewart, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for talking to me.
Jon Stewart is in New York talking about